Welcome, many and everyone, to this session of the 7th edition of the Plural Positivity World Conference. This session is presented by Grose, covering important and sensitive topics including mention of various kinds of abuse and trauma, but no in-depth descriptions. Please remember to prioritize your self-care during this session. You're encouraged to take breaks whenever needed and honor your collective emotional well-being. If you have questions for the presenter, please share them under the Questions tab so they can be addressed during the live Q&A. Afterward, we warmly invite you to visit this presenter's booth where you'll find helpful PDFs and additional free resources. Now, without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our wonderful presenter to you all. Here is Grose.
Hello, everyone. Our session today is called Finding the Truth in Fiction. Today we'll be talking with AJ and Coriander, and so we'll start with a little bit about ourselves. We're Tethered Collective. We have roughly 30 members in our system of various species, genders, ages, and races. We use this lovely little octopus to represent our system because that's how we feel connected, and that's an animal that we're drawn to that seems to represent our collective experience. The body is 33, and we have a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology. The main speaker today is AJ Grose. He goes by he, they pronouns, and his alias in the system is the author. He has limited communication with others in the system, and I'm not entirely sure why that is yet, but we'll figure that out eventually. And then the other person that will be talking today is Coriander. She goes by she, her, and she recently just came out of dormancy after being a front for many years. Honestly, if all credit should be given, that Bachelor of Psychology is technically hers. So let's start with writing as a tool. We all know that writing is clearly a helpful tool for communication. There's journaling, poetry, memoir, and they're all useful for communicating ideas, and they're especially helpful for those who are non-vocal, as they can be a great alternative to actually speaking, and it's sometimes easier to explain your ideas on paper or in text versus speaking them out loud, because some people are shy and some people just don't like the sound of their own voice, especially those of us who are systems who have multiple voices that don't always come out with the, vocal equipment that we were born with. Another way that writing is a great tool is that you can give more vivid descriptions and with using colorful language and things like that you can't always do on the fly whenever you're writing, and it makes it an experience that others can visualize, well, some others can visualize, that they might not have experienced in their life. Writing can also contain hidden information, like whenever you're reading a poem and there's like a hidden meaning throughout the words, or like for an easy, quick example would be like an acrostic poem. You don't realize it's an acrostic until after you've already read the whole thing, and there's like words down the side, and it's like, oh, that's cool, and then you find out what it's actually about. Overall, it's creative, and it's also a form of catharsis that lets you release extra tension and just all these other built-up emotions that might not always have a better place to relieve themselves. The other kind of writing, and the one I want to focus on today, is fiction writing. Cambridge Dictionary defines fiction writing as the type of book or story that is written about imaginary characters and events and not based on real people and facts. So you got your short stories, your flash fiction, novellas, and novels. I think all of you can think of at least one example of fiction writing. I mean, your horror genres, that's a personal favorite of ours. Fairy tales, romance, comedy, anything, it's limitless. The main point here is it isn't supposed to be believed and it isn't real. And that's the key. So what? Why is that important? Because it provides comfort and safety to the person writing it. Because fiction isn't supposed to be believed, it gives you freedom to explore. It gives you freedom to explore these ideas and thoughts and feelings that normally you can't really feel. Some people don't really feel comfortable putting down in poetry or creative nonfiction because that gets oftentimes directly tied back to the author. But because you have that comfort and safety of metaphor and symbolism and just fantasy and creativity, you can hide truth inside of it. Not necessarily being aware that there's hidden truths in it all the time, as we'll find out here in a bit, but they're there. And this brings us to like the meat of this whole shebang here. You can use it to express these taboo emotions. Like you can express rage through your fiction writing whenever you normally don't feel comfortable expressing it any other time, even though it's a normal emotion and a normal feeling you're allowed to have. You can illustrate intrusive thoughts so that way they're not constantly badgering you all the time. You can portray an emotional flashback without it being tied to your own experiences. You can give some random character you made up a flashback so that way other people can understand, hey, I've lived through something similar to this, but they don't have to know that it was you that lived through it. But that pain can get translated out of your head and onto the paper. So that way it's not bothering you nearly as much. And the other thing that I've noticed personally in our writing is recurring imagery. It's a good way to go back through. It's a good thing to go back through and look at your writing and see what kind of little images show up in just about everything. Because then that's a key to tying things together. It's like its own little signature. I like to call it a sheep in wolf's clothing, very opposite of the common phrase, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because instead of it being a scary thing pretending to be a calm and nice thing, it's, how I put it here, it's the delicate things you want to protect or afraid to share are hidden within something else that doesn't feel so direct or transparent. That little sheep of truth is covering itself in the big scary wolf so that way it keeps back all the other wolves or everyone else so it can get out into the wild without being bothered. And that's basically what these hidden truths are doing, wearing this cloak of fiction in this writing, and I think it's really interesting and it's very helpful. So I wanted to give an example. I will say there is a content warning because, one, it is a horror story. Don't worry, it's not very long. It is about a medical procedure. There's violence, death, there's police involved. So if you wish to not listen to the story, I would say turn your volume off, and by the time the next slide appears, it will be over. Okay, so I shall begin. Unseen Door. It is July 7th, 2022. The patient's name is Yvette Higgins. She's a 32-year-old woman. Height is 5'6", and weight is 224 pounds. I will be examining the patient's left eye, as she has been complaining of complete vision loss. Of course, today's examination is going to be a bit different than my usual proceedings, seeing as the patient has been heavily sedated. Today's examination will be performed on site at the medical facility currently housing the patient. With me, I have Officer Cheryl Duncan and Officer Lauren Brown. They will be here for my protection as well as that of the patient. However, I don't believe we'll be needing much protection so long as Miss Higgins is asleep. We're just doing our job, Doctor. Of course. Well then, can you hand me the patient's file, Officer Duncan? I'm going to relay her information into my notes while I'm waiting for her eyes to dilate. Thank you. Are you familiar with the case? More or less. The prosecution wants me on the witness stand as an expert witness. So let's see here. Yes. The patient first complained of visual loss back in April of this year, but she saw her endocrinologist first. Apparently, she was afraid it was in connection with the spironolactone she's been taking, as vision loss is a known side effect. However, her blood work came back normal, and the sudden onset of the vision loss was not characteristic of that medication. So she was advised to see a neurologist. The neurologist ordered both an MRI without contrast and an EEG to see if there was anything out of the ordinary, both structurally and electrically. Both tests came back normal. Even more interesting is that the patient's right eye shows no signs of abnormal vision at all. There had been no falls, no accidents. The patient reports no excessive alcohol usage and is not a smoker, so the neurologist referred her to an ophthalmologist. The appointment with the ophthalmologist was June 2nd, 2022. She saw Dr. James Fox, and it was during this examination that the patient supposedly killed him. He was unable to record any of his findings, and he was found with lacerations around his face and neck in the examination room. The patient claimed to not know what happened. She stated that things were normal one moment, then Dr. Fox was bleeding. Seeing as there wasn't any evidence to hold her, she was allowed to go home after police questioning. On June 15th, almost 2 weeks later, the patient had an appointment with Dr. Meredith Klein. This time, not only was the patient complaining of vision loss, still localized to the left eye, but of severe pain in that eye as well. Thanks to Dr. Klein's medical scribe, it was noted that the patient had a ruptured cornea, which would certainly account for the onset of pain. Dr. Klein suggested that it may have been an injury during the previous attack. However, at this point, the note becomes illegible. Dr. Klein and her scribe were both found dead in the exam room. So this time, not only has the patient been fully sedated, but she has been firmly secured to the chair should she wake up during the examination. I spoke with her briefly prior to the exam. She claims she's completely innocent of the crime, that some monster did it. She was also not comfortable with the idea of being sedated for the exam, but I assured her it was as a safety precaution. I'll take the file back now. Oh, yes, thank you, Officer Duncan. Shall we begin then? By this point, the patient's eyes should be fully dilated. I note the damage in the left eye when I administered the drops. Not only is the cornea ruptured, but the iris has been torn as well. Significant levels of trauma that need to be surgically reversed if possible. But for now, I'm just here to see what's going on overall. I'm placing an eyelid speculum in the right eye to start. The surface of the eye is normal. Iris is intact. Lens and retina all look as healthy as can be. This should be no surprise, as this eye is not the one in question. However, I'm not going to examine one without the other. There will be some discomfort when the patient wakes up, but that should pass. Now I'm opening the left eye. Right away, I can clearly see the torn iris and severe damage to the cornea. It looks as though the patient had been stabbed in the eye at one point. There also appears to be hair-like fibers in the pupil, though I'm not sure what that could... Doctor? What is that? The heck should I know? Just kill it. The tape continued, with only more screaming and another gunshot before falling eerily silent. Detective Linwood watched as the irritated expression on Captain Burns' face turned to one of fear and disgust. We're still working with the hospital security to acquire the surveillance footage from the exam room, said the detective as he stopped the audio recording. He then dropped a file on the desk, its contents slightly slipping out the edge. Higgins is back in custody for now. The body count is up to 6, so I don't know any jury that'll let her walk. Okay, so for those that listened, thank you, I appreciate. For those that didn't, I understand your choice not to. But we're just going to do a little quick breakdown. First off, this was written prior to our DID diagnosis. We hate hospitals. This is just a fact. Always have. And it was originally written as a commentary on how trans people are treated in healthcare, as well as a commentary on police corruption. There was more to it prior to us reading this version. It's been edited a little bit, and it's still kind of a work in progress, but that's the best version we have of it. So it's not nearly what I had intended it to be when I first wrote it. But on the surface, you can clearly see that it's supposed to be a horror story. And this is just the surface level truth that you see from this fiction story. Now, if you look deeper into it, there are clear protector themes that are like blatantly just there whenever you look at it through a plural lens and look at it through an enlightened plural lens on our own end. And it is plurally charged, having this tentacle monster. We are tied with the idea of an octopus. Not necessarily an octopus living in our brain. No. But, just all of us are kind of like, each of us are our own little tentacle kind of idea. It's complicated, but tentacles and octopus and tentacle monster thing, that's our recurring image that seems to show up in all of our writing. But, I mean, having that monster that lives in behind her eye, it coming out almost like a defense mechanism, like a protector. that depiction of, well, I just woke up, I don't know what happened. I mean, that's a metaphorical experience for dissociative amnesia that many of us have experienced. I know I've definitely experienced recently, within the past few years, some pretty scary moments where my protector just jumped in and helped me and I don't know what happened. Which brings us to, it's not just a horror story, it is a plural horror story based off of something we specifically feel and fear. So that brings us to why using fiction as a means of communicating our truths is so important for plurals. A big thing is, if you are a plural that is in therapy, it can lead to therapeutic breakthroughs. It can help you make those connections. That reoccurring imagery isn't just a fluke. There's no flukes or coincidences. Things happen for a reason. It's just a matter of figuring out the reasons. It can help you process these difficult memories that normally you would just push aside or just like power through them or shove off on another part so that way they can deal with it instead of you. It can also encourage quieter headmates or parts or alters, whichever your preferred terminology is, to have a way to communicate within this system and even outside of the system if they want their own voice to be heard. And, of course, it can help them figure out what their role is. I mean, we didn't realize well, honestly, I mean, we've learned quite a lot through our own writing about how our system works. And that's a big reason why we wanted to share this with everybody in the first place. But why does it work? Let's give you our personal example. AJ, the author, he can't write directly about our trauma or our experience. He is our writer, but he can't do memoir or creative nonfiction. He definitely doesn't do poetry. He just writes fiction based on stuff that he finds in the headspace, and I don't know where all he gets his ideas. But the big thing is, if he figures out that what he's writing ties into things that we've experienced as a system, he completely stops and doesn't go back to it. The best way to kind of explain this is an example that if you've ever had a pet dog and you have to give it medication and you like wrap it up in a piece of cheese or put it in like one of those like little pill pocket things. It's all well and good until they realize they're getting the medication, and they'll eat everything else around it and then spit the pill back out. That's kind of like how AJ is with writing. Once he figures out that little morsel of truth is in there, he just stops. He's not going to touch it again. So, having this fiction helps to disguise basically the taste of truth to make it more tolerable, to make it more digestible for those other parts that can't necessarily handle dealing with it. And to make it more digestible and tolerable for outsiders to deal with as well. If you're the type of person or system that wants to share those truths within and don't want other people figuring it out so quickly. It all comes back to comfort and safety. You're able to hide that. You're able to have that like layer of protection, that shield of fantasy, that shield of fiction to keep you safe as you power through life. And that gives you resilience, because that gives you a voice where previously you might not have thought you had one. Our own personal experience. What we've learned recently through this. We're going to start off from the beginning here. We started writing back in elementary school. AJ started writing as far back as we can remember. We completed our first novel by 9th grade. And it is horrible. Just horrible. Nobody's ever allowed to read that. It's bad. But it's pretty impressive. 15 years old, making a novel. We tend to stay with the horror, sci-fi, fantasy genre. Strong, powerful female characters that like to conquer evil, and they either come out stronger or they sacrifice themselves for the greater good, but they always go through some type of hardships. And I've recently discovered that there's a lot of multiplicity in our stories. Imagine that. But this little nugget of truth that we've recently figured out is that the themes in AJ's writing parallel our current fears and stressors, like the unseen door. It parallels our frustrations with the medical system. I'll just leave it at that. That way, yeah. A lot of our parts and headmates tend to show up in the naming. Like our first novel, one of our really prominent fronts is named after the main character. And names in general play a huge role. And you might find that in your own writing, that some of your original characters are original and special for you for a reason. Water, ocean, sea creatures, tentacle monsters, all of that always seem to come back in some way. And I'm not entirely sure why. I do know there's a large spot in our headspace that we do call the ocean that is a no-go zone for most of us. So it could be in relation to that. It could be in relation to the fact that we wanted to be a marine biologist as a child. Who knows? But that's a recurring theme that we find. And most recently, it has been discovered that AJ, the author, uses pieces of our trauma to inflict trauma on these lovely, strong female characters. Now, whether he does this intentional or he's unaware, we're not sure of. But it is a very interesting dynamic that we previously were unaware of until we started dissecting our own writing through this lens of, hey, it's not just a story. There might be some truth in here. Now, I know I've said a lot of things, and a lot of it has been about our own system, but I think the big thing that I wanted to share with everybody today, and so that's what I'll end on, is that anyone that wants to write and share their experiences and have a voice can do so. You don't have to remember every detail of your past and write a memoir or a biography to share your experiences with the world. You don't have to be an amazing poet to share your experiences with the world. You can write a scary story or a funny story or a story of a raccoon getting stuck in a attic while trying to steal a sword from Dracula, and share your truth within that, because either way, that truth is going to come out because it wants to, and you have the power to share that as a collective system. You can work together and find ways to share those truths in a way that is comfortable and safe for you to do. And I think that's such an amazing superpower that we systems have at our disposal that singlets do not. Thank you all for coming today. I hope this was as beneficial for you to listen to as it was for me to share. And I hope you all have a wonderful experience at the Plural Positivity World Conference.